Every 4 years, the World Cup reminds us why sports can be so inspiring. But today's episode isn't really about soccer, it's about resilience. It's about pressure. It's about what separates people who eventually become champions from those who quit too early. Today, we're actually looking at two incredible lessons from the World Cup, which is going on right now. And the first of the two is all about Lionel Messi's comeback story, one of the greatest redemption stories in sports history. And then, second, what penalty kicks teach us about performing when everything is on the line. Whether you guys are building a business, buying your first home, maybe chasing financial freedom, or simply trying to become a better version of yourself, these lessons apply to every single one of us. Let's jump into a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast with my co-host Ben. What is up, dude?
Well, how you doing? Have you been enjoying this World Cup in
I
2026
have,
so far?
man. I have. We had a really good match last night that I enjoyed, or yesterday afternoon with Paraguay and Germany, which was super cool to see. What about you, man?
Yeah, same thing. I've tried to watch as many games as I can. I didn't grow up playing soccer. I've never been a soccer fan. I've never even been to a soccer game. But for me, World Cup is must watch. I'm trying to watch every game that I can of the United States, and then just every game in general. Watching a lot of replays too. And so the fact that it's here in America on home soil, it's been a lot of fun just to see. Also, like all the Europeans' reactions to America as well. I found that very fascinating.
Hmm.
That should be another podcast.
Definitely. Yeah, it's cool to seeing how different cultures handle this type of stuff, like Japan, how they clean the stadiums after every match, just in some of the opening, like the getting pumped up before the game, like with Norway and some of the other teams. There's
Yeah,
definitely a lot of really cool cultural aspects to the World Cup.
and just seeing how passionate a lot of these fans are, you can tell how much the beautiful game means to them, and it's fun to. Yeah, I just find myself when I watch these games, realizing that I'm watching people who are the best in their country. Like, just to be on the men's national team for the United States, you have to be the best or among the best in the entire United States. And every country is sending their very best to go compete. And so I think when you look at it through that lens, that you're really watching the very best in the world at what they do, I mean, it gives extra meaning to me.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, let's jump into it. I'd love to have you kind of kick us off and just talk a little bit about Lionel Messi for anybody that's out there listening or watching on YouTube today that doesn't know who he is. Give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, well, Lionel Messi, the greatest chapter that almost never happened. When people think about Lionel Messi today, they picture one image, him lifting the World Cup trophy from 4 years ago. But what most people forget is everything that came before it. He lost the 2014 World Cup final. Then he lost three major international finals with Argentina. The criticism became relentless. People questioned whether he would ever lead Argentina to a championship. Eventually, the disappointment became so overwhelming that he actually retired from international soccer after the 2016 Copa America final. Can you imagine that? One of the greatest athletes in history deciding he was done because the heartbreak became too much. Fortunately for all of us, he came back. He won Copa America. He won the uh, final Isima. I know I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. And finally, in 2022, 4 years ago, at the last World Cup, he won the one trophy everyone said he needed, the World Cup. So imagine if he had stayed retired. The greatest chapter of his entire career never would have happened. How many people quit before they ever reached the best part of the story? That's one of my favorite mindsets and beliefs is that if you don't quit, you can't lose. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but you have to learn to go through the storm, go through hell. Just keep battling, keep showing up. We're experiencing that some of that in this real estate mortgage market right now. There's some economic concerns. There's a lot going on, but you just keep going.
Definitely, man. It's kind of like the Wayne Gretzky quote too. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Just realizing that
Hmm.
failure isn't the end; it's preparation. I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons from that entire story with Messi is just that failure doesn't disqualify you; it actually prepares you. And how every one of these setbacks, they eventually, if you look at it through the right lens, they teach you something. Every
Yeah.
disappointment, it builds up that resilience. every obstacle kind of develops your character. And the people that we
Hmm.
really admire aren't the people who avoided failure. They're the people who actually kept showing up after it. So, I think about again, like you were saying with real estate and mortgage, not every single offer gets accepted. For us, not every client ends up working out. Not every year is your best year ever. But I think every challenge teaches you something, and that makes you
Yeah.
better for the next opportunity. And that I think definitely still also applies to life, whether it be a breakup or a divorce, maybe a layoff or a job career change, maybe a failed business or a failed investment, maybe even like your health, some sort of a setback with your health. None of those have to define your story unless you decide. The key there is you decide that is your final chapter. So, like Messi, sometimes your greatest victory only comes because of those greatest disappointments, not in spite of it. I think that's really
Yeah, and it's also, I think, learning to reframe what failure is. When I was younger, when I was a kid, even in high school and later, I looked at failure as final. And I didn't have the attitude or the mindset that, you know what, I can grow from this, I can learn from this. This is going to make me stronger. And so, learning that, um, you can welcome failure into your life, not because you're trying to fail, but when you do fail, you can accept it as something that's going to help make you better. It's going to make you tougher, stronger, more resilient, more determined. Um, and so it can transform your life if you change your mindset.
love that. So true.
Yeah. Now I wanted to talk about penalty kicks. These last, these last two games from last night, we were treated with penalty kicks. Like, I can't think of anything in all of sports that is more of a treat than watching World Cup penalty kicks just because of the pressure. Can you think of a something else in sports that's more pressure filled?
Other than other penalty shots like in hockey, or maybe like, the very end of like playoff football where it's in overtime and you can't have a tie, you have to have somebody win, some of that kind of stuff. But yeah, when it comes down to PKs, penalty kicks, the fact that it's just one person at a time, and I can't
Yeah.
think of a more stressful thing than the goalie. And like you think about like golfers, like they have that one missed shot and then they, think about
Hmm.
it for 2 or 3 days until the next tournament. Just like the mind, the power that you must have to have as a goalie with your mindset just to be able to, kind of move on and not let
Yeah.
it just pull you down.
You know,
Crazy.
the mindset from the striker and then also the goalie, you have to be very mentally strong because if you're the goalie, the odds are not in your favor.
Mhm.
And if you're a striker, though, that means that a lot of the pressure is on you. And a lot of these players have spent 20 years or more practicing. You think of all of the hours, thousands of kicks, and then suddenly everything comes down to one shot, especially in some of those games last night. And with that
Mhm.
one shot, there's one opportunity. The fate of your entire team, your entire nation hangs on your foot. That one decision with millions, sometimes even over a billion people around the world watching. That is what's pressure. But that's also what separates champions. Champions don't eliminate pressure, they prepare so thoroughly that the pressure simply reveals what they've already built. This is a quote that I love. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your preparation. And this applies everywhere: your listing presentation, your job interview, your first home purchase, that difficult conversation, the business launch. Pressure isn't creating the outcome, it's revealing whether you've done the work beforehand.
Love that. When I hearing you talk about that, it makes me also think about the coach Saban, who is, one of the most successful coaches of all time for the Alabama college football team. And he talks about how, they practice I'm going to butcher this quote. I'm talking about? We practice not to fail, but we practice not to get it right. We practice not to make a mistake. Is that right?
Yes, something like that, something along
Yeah.
those lines.
Kind of
Yeah.
the same idea though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to kind of phrase this thing we're talking about here, but yeah, going back to just the pressure, I cannot even fathom just how intense that must be.
And you realize, what I was saying earlier with we are watching the very best players in the world from representing their country. And there were players and strikers that went up there without hesitation and struck the ball hard, put it in the back of the net. But then there were others that didn't even get a shot on goal or it sailed over the net. or
That would be the
there was,
worst.
to not even get it on net. And
Yeah.
that happened a couple times in that Germany game. And it's like, if you're on the team or if you're the coach or if you're a fan and you don't even get it on net, on goal, oh, it's the pressure.
Yeah. That would, I think, would be the hardest for me if I was one of the guys kicking was just, you at least kick a good shot and the goalie gets it. It's basically, it's odds, it's gambling. It's, what direction did the goalie decide to jump? If you jump the right
Mhm.
way, there's a good chance he's going to get the ball. But, that's within, that's within control. However, if you just
Yeah.
completely miss altogether, that's all you. And that would be tougher, I think.
Mhm.
I'd like to just kind of now tie these two stories together. So again, about Messi, and then also about the PK shots, the penalty kicks. Just about how your greatest moment is actually being built right now, right this very second, and
Yeah.
that's the connection
Yeah.
between these two stories. Messi, he didn't become a champion overnight. The player taking that penalty kick didn't become confident overnight. These defining
Mhm.
moments, they were built long before anybody was watching, and that's how life works. The person who becomes financially free doesn't suddenly decide one day. They built years of good habits. The
Yeah.
entrepreneur who builds a successful company, they're not lucky. They spend years, learning, failing, improving, showing up, all those things that nobody sees behind closed doors. The couple, with a great marriage, they didn't stumble into it. They invested in each other on a consistent basis. So, your future is being built by these conversations you're having, the habits that you're repeating, the books that you're reading, the decisions that you're making today. So, if you're in a season where things are feeling difficult, you guys don't quit. Just remember that if you're under pressure, lean into your preparation. And remember this, the greatest chapter of your story might still actually be ahead of you. I think that's really important.
And that's right, and what you said is so true. Every great story, think of all the great sports stories or business stories, political stories. They're never about someone who was just great and they went on. They were the best as a kid, as an adolescent, as a high schooler in college, and they just won every. No, those aren't the best stories. In fact, those stories, a lot of times, they don't really exist. The best stories are the stories. How big was the mountain of adversity that you overcame? The reason people love John Elway's story is because he failed, he lost a Super Bowl, he failed, he lost a Super Bowl, lost another Super Bowl, and it was a story of redemption. Never gave up, kept coming back, and then finally won those last 2 Super Bowls his last 2 years, and that's Messi's story too. And then when you look at the World Cup that he's having this year, he's now the all-time leading scorer in goals in World Cup history. He scored 6 goals through 3 games, and they haven't even played the knockout round yet. And to think that he may not have played again in international play after 2014, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Definitely, man. Yeah. You can't not, root for the guy. People have this big argument or debate between, who's the best soccer player, Messi, Ronaldo, these different other figures. But, when it comes down to things like this, just the pressure and overcoming the adversity, overcoming that mountain, I think that kind of cements it for me with Messi, just the fact that he was able to achieve it just through this persistence.
Yeah, and he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, he isn't the most flamboyant, he's not the most well-liked, but he is someone that's beloved because, he has learned that failure is never final, and the penalty kicks remind us that the pressure doesn't create champions, it reveals them. So whatever your challenges that you're facing today, keep preparing, keep growing, keep believing, because someday when your moment comes, you'll be grateful you didn't give up before the trophy. Just wanted to thank everybody for joining us on another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, keep moving forward. God bless.
Go USA.
USA.
We'll catch you guys next
USA.
week.